Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Markey, and thank you for your leadership in the FAA bill and getting those provisions to protect consumers. And yes, we're hearing more about the theft, particularly today, of the mileage program and the need to protect that. So, but again, appreciate your leadership and communication on this. I'm just going to ask a couple of just roundup questions, and I think we're done with other members here, and then we'll adjourn. But one of the key messages from today is the need for communication. And I want to clarify now what is that immediate step on impacting that communication, best practices. We know that there is an ARC process at the FAA on cybersecurity, much bigger picture. That's going to take a while. But what now are we doing? So, Mr. Little, who is the lead investigator on this attack? Is it the FBI or?
Yes, the FBI is.
Okay, and then what would the witnesses suggest is the best communication framework right now until the ARC process works to communicate to other airports the best practices and things that should be implemented from this? I would like to see a list. One of the reasons we gave the NTSB a report requirement, an annual report requirement, because we didn't feel like people were emphasizing enough next steps after some of their indications from accident reports, what should happen. And so they have now done that, and I thought it was very successful. They came before the committee and basically said, yeah, these near misses aren't getting addressed, and then the next day the then acting administrator convened and put out a requirement. So here we're trying to get the same level of response. What would you suggest, Mr. Brayroot or General Reynolds, to what in the near term is that process?
So, Senator, from a consumer point of view, clear communication and actionable communication from airlines to consumers is incredibly important. From the time that the breach or the cybersecurity incident will first impact their travel, consumers need to be made aware of that. Consumers often show up at an airport in the CrowdStrike instance, and we saw report after report that consumers were confused. They didn't know what was going on. They were getting mixed messages from the airlines and other sources about what the status was of their flight and if they were going to have to wait 30 minutes or if the flight was going to get canceled. So I think it's really important that any cybersecurity response plan have a component in there about communicating with the passengers about how this will impact the flight that they're waiting for at the airport that day, or the flight that they're going to leave home early in the morning to catch the next morning.
Mr. Reynolds, since this is a airport issue, but it affects airline capacity, what do you think the tool is for right now streamlining best practices and communicating that?
Senator, it's a very important question. The industry relies heavily on standards. And in fact, it's been founded on standards in many ways, and it's driven our safety record to the level it has largely because of standards. I would start there. It does take time to create the standards. It does take time to actually, you start with the best practice, then you start moving into the standards. I think the tabletop exercise we all talked about, I think that's also a very effective way for us to communicate with one another. We also participate with the Aviation Information Sharing and Analysis Center to share information back and forth with their members and our members as well. And I think the other part too I just referenced is that any opportunity for us to work closely with the federal government, either working groups or opportunities for us to share lessons learned, is beneficial for not just the industry but also for the government as well.
Well, I think does that exist right now? I'm saying I'm not sure that exists, that framework right now.
We are working with on the information sharing. We are working with TSA, FAA, and others to develop and work with them on this very topic, information sharing. The TSA, in fact, they have a air domain and analysis, intelligence and analysis cell that has been very helpful. They lead in this case. We have meetings with them every day to talk about what's happening in the environment. There seems to be a really nice set of progress checks with them and the FAA and others to find ways in which we can improve information sharing. But it's in the early stages.
Yeah, I keep thinking about NARUC, and I was looking up trying to figure out remember what its acronym stands for, but it's basically a voluntary utility organization that decades ago did the same practice. Why? Because they were being impacted so much. And so I think that we have to figure out here how to formalize this now while the ARC rulemaking process at FAA is going through to see what we can get from just communication, a daily communication. As was said, people want to know, well, what's the next best thing to implement? And I'm pretty sure here it's going to be related to hygiene, which is pretty simple and pretty basic, but something that could get emphasized. And so maybe that is the FAA, you know, putting that notice out, or maybe it's also the industry working collaboratively. And so that's what I think. We need both. In my opinion, we need both, because the industry can work very collaboratively very quickly, and they know the systems they're trying to improve. One thing, General Reynolds, since you're here, in our state, there's been a lot of collaboration with the Guard and Reserve, because there's so many people who work in IT and are state guardsmen, and they would like to play a more active role here. So when you talk about the workforce shortage, you're thinking, well, what could they do to just, you know, hammer home this hygiene issue and be part of a response? I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Absolutely, ma'am. I have business cards I'll hand to you, and if you have anyone who's interested in joining the airlines, we would love to have them. Phenomenal capability. I'm very familiar with the folks up there in your state. Phenomenal capability, because they have their day job. They know the insights they can bring to the military is phenomenal. So I appreciate you mentioning them. The Guard and Reserves do a phenomenal job in this space.
Well, I think they know what's their job, to protect us on critical infrastructure. So we've had this discussion with them in Washington, in the state of Washington, on cybersecurity for many years. And I think I had Senator Murkowski come to an event on this many years ago when we were looking at vulnerabilities, particularly in schools. And they were active and they had been deployed. There was a lot of cooperation between entities. But as this need continues to grow, and it's not just going to be in the aviation sector, other sectors, where are we going to get that workforce? And how are we going to get these evangelists out there communicating to people? But I think everybody here, I think the key takeaways: better protection for consumers on Million Miler program, better communication to airport infrastructure and airport employees to harden our resources, that this is a growing issue. It's not going to shrink. The best way to do it is communicate what we need to do to harden those resources. Is that right? Is that okay. Well, thank all the witnesses. You have, the record will remain open for 4 weeks until October 16th. Any senators who'd like to submit questions, do so by October, by that time. And then 2 weeks from now, we will have the record complete. So thank you so much, and appreciate your willingness to respond to our colleagues. We're adjourned.